latest podcast, the Heidelminicast.
It's a Heidelminicast. And now, Scott Clark.
Does Clark make straw men out of Baptists?
If the Heidelcast helps you, will you help us keep it going? Please make the coffer clink by clicking on the PayPal link or by sending a check to Heidelberg Reformation Association, 1637 East Valley Parkway, number 391, Escondido, California, 92027.
You really should subscribe to the Heidelcast in any podcast app. Subscribe to the Heidelblog at heidelblog.net/subscribe. We send you a daily email, just a rundown of what's on the HB for that day. And we don't pester you or do anything else with your email. And then, of course, you want to download the Heidel app from Google Play or from the Apple App Store.
The Heidelcast.
And we've got an Apple comment or a comment on Apple Podcasts.
Apple Podcast comment.
All right. This one is from Bobby Capps. He gives the show 5 stars. Thank you very much. He says, Dr. Clark, have been a Reformed Baptist, what we mean by it, covenantal, and then in parenthesis 3, I think he means 3 covenants, comma, confessional, for many years. Almost thou hast persuaded me to become a Presbyterian. The thing that I didn't get was the distinction between Moses and Abraham. It is very clear to me now, thanks to your teaching. If you'd like a pushback, sometime use Strawman Baptist. Just because we don't fit a historical definition of Reformed, as you insist, does not mean that words and their meanings don't adapt and change. Reformed, it seems to me, now means either particular Baptist or other Reformed expressions who are, 1, tri-covenantal, and 2, adhere to various confessions that emerged from the Reformation period. Neither here nor there for me, just trying to help you understand the terms and their meanings as I see it. Back to you. I have many past Baptist friends who are particular in their view of salvation, not just predestinarian, but also Ordo Salutis at all. Many of them attend Presbyterian churches, but still hold to believers' baptism. Your series has helped many of them, especially me. I wish you could actually address/refute our arguments the way we see them, though, instead of just presenting the Presbyterian position. Awesome show. I'm hooked. Well, thank you, Bobby. I appreciate that. And so this isn't just a comment. It's also a mild complaint. And he makes some objections and some arguments to which I think I should reply. I think it might be helpful. First of all, let's go back up to the beginning of Bobby's comment where he says what we mean by it. And so he wants to redefine when he says Reformed Baptist. So I'm going to take those together. And he thinks that if you hold to 3 covenants and if you're confessional, right, that's the first claim that he makes, that makes one a Reformed Baptist. Well, we've never said from the 1640s and following that Baptists weren't confessional. We recognized they were confessional. We engaged with their confessions and we disagreed with them. So whether one is confessional or not is immaterial. The Anabaptists had confessions and we denounced them in our confessions. In Article 34, in the Belgian Confession in 1561, the Reformed churches said, and we still say today, for that reason, we detest the error of the Anabaptists who are not content with a single baptism once received and also condemn the baptism of the children of believers. We believe our children ought to be baptized and sealed with the sign of the covenant, as little children were circumcised in Israel on the basis of the same promises made to our children. And truly, Christ has shed his blood no less for washing the little children of believers than he did for adults. Therefore, they ought to receive the sign and sacrament of what Christ has done for them, just as the Lord commanded in the law, that by offering a lamb for them, the sacrament of the suffering and death of Christ would be granted them shortly after their birth. This was the sacrament of Jesus Christ. Furthermore, baptism does for our children what circumcision did for the Jewish people. That is why Paul calls baptism the circumcision of Christ. So we were well aware of various Anabaptist confessions. There was one from 1527, and then there were subsequent confessions. And so all through our history, we were conscious that the Anabaptists had confessions, and we didn't say, well, they have confessions, therefore they're partly Reformed. No, we denounced them, right? We detest the error of the Anabaptists. That's not just a bit of hyperbole. It's not just the private opinion of a systematic theologian. No, that is the public, formal confession of all the Reformed churches who sign the Belgic Confession. So being confessional doesn't make one Reformed. And covenantal in and of itself doesn't make one necessarily Reformed. There are different versions of covenant theology. There were different approaches to covenant theology in the medieval period. And they were confessional in some way. Everybody subscribed the ecumenical creeds, for example. So you could say, well, they were covenantal and they were confessional. Well, they aren't Reformed. So those are arguments I hear all the time from Baptist people, which suggests to me that they don't really understand our objections. And that's why I've written so much about it. And that's what puzzles me about your complaint, Bobby, that I, as you say, straw man Baptist. And what you, I think, mean to say is that I make a straw man out of the Baptist position, which I reject. I don't accept that characterization at all. And the reason I don't is because I've written a great deal. So maybe you're just depending on the Heidelcast, and I haven't, made podcasts out of everything that I've written about the Baptist. I guess I could do that. I could make maybe a Saturday series or something like that out of it so that you could hear it. But it's right there on the Heidelblog and also in print for you to read. If you go to the Heidelblog resource page, just on baptism, heidelblog.net/baptism, you will see a bunch of articles, a lot of them explaining baptism, but almost all of them. And I'm just paging down here to see how many there are. 78. I don't think I knew that there were 78 resources on this page. Some of them are podcasts and things, and so that might be of use. But 78 entries, and the last several of them from 66 and following are podcasts, it looks like to me. But for example, number 65 is a link to the series on Daniel Featley. So I wish you would read that, because there I worked very hard to try to tell an objective story and try to explain to Baptists, once again, he says, how the Reformed looked at the Baptists and why the Reformed said to them from the very beginning, right? The Westminster Assembly asked Featley, more or less insisted, while he was in jail, by the way, which is, I think, amazing. And what else has he got to do? So he said yes, and he wrote a series of articles, or he wrote a pamphlet, really is what I should say, a treatise, responding to the emerging particular Baptist movement. And he denounced them as Anabaptists and engaged them at some length, and originally then added to it, so it got a little longer. And I just tried to describe all that and to try to paint the picture and help people understand what were the Reformed objections. And this is an early response, right at the headwaters of the particular Baptist movement. So he's responding and interacting with the period of particular Baptist theology as it's coming to expression in what's now called the First London Baptist Confession, or the First London Confession in 1644. And there are a number of other pieces on the Heidelblog where I engage particular Baptist writers and particular Baptist texts at some length.
The Heidelcast.
More people are consuming Heidel media than ever before. This is Heidelcast News. I'm the voice. More people from across the globe are listening and reading, from Sao Paulo to Toronto, and from Cape Town to London. Let's keep it going. Tell your friends, make the coffer clink, or send a check to the Heidelberg Reformation Association, 1637 East Valley Parkway, number 391, Escondido, California, 92027. Now, more music with Scott Clark on Q96.
Voice?
Yes?
That was a long time ago. Different gig. This is the Heidelcast.
Sorry about that. It's the flashbacks.
The Heidelcast.
It is the Heidelcast, and we're answering a question. I am answering a question from Bobby about why I say what I do about the Baptists and whether I'm making a straw man. So making a straw man is creating an impression or describing a position that no one holds. And basically, it's a violation of the Ninth Commandment. So I don't think that's true because I've worked very diligently to try to understand the particular Baptist movement and to engage their sources and texts, at some length. So, for example, if you look at the baptism page, heidelblog.net/baptism, there are links to a series of articles that I haven't yet finished. I'll come back to it and finish it, where I compare the 1689 with the Westminster Confession, showing the similarities and differences. There's a piece entitled, this is number 51 on the list, Engaging Confessional Baptists on Covenant Theology. Well, 1551, that's parts 1 and 2, on typology and the unity of salvation. There's an article, There is no Credo-Baptist Heidelberg Catechism, or Why Hercules Collins Was Not Reformed, where I look at what Hercules Collins tried to do to the Heidelberg Catechism. There's an article, number 47, An Intramural Baptist Debate, that illumines the profound differences between Baptist and Reformed theology, piety, and practice. There's a series called Engaging with 1689. It's quite long. In other words, if I gathered up all the stuff that I've written, looking at Baptist texts and working through some aspects of Baptist history, it would make a nice little monograph. So maybe I will do that someday. I haven't done it yet. So I just don't think it's true or fair or accurate at all to say I've made a straw man of the Baptist view. Remember, I taught Baptist students at my seminary. We hosted on our campus, there was a separate institution, but we hosted a Reformed or a particular Baptist seminary for 20-some years, and I taught students from that institution in my classes for the whole time it was on campus, and we did great. And I learned a lot from talking to them. I hope they learned something from talking to me. So that's why I say. So it may be that you haven't seen those articles, and so I would encourage you to go look at those and not just rely on, what's happening on the Heidelcast. I can't do or haven't done everything on the Heidelcast that I've written. So, as I say, maybe I should do that.
The best podcast.
Heidelcast.
Now, I want to address this second argument you make that I get all the time, and that is that the meanings of words change. Well, they do. That's just a historical fact. The word nice is a classic example. It is derived from the Latin word nescius, which means stupid or ignorant, but today nobody means to signal that when they use the word nice. If somebody has a nice car, I say, nice car. I don't mean stupid car or ignorant car or anything like that. I mean, it's pretty, it's well made, it's new, it's shiny, whatever the context might suggest. So I get that. But here's the thing. The word reformed hasn't changed its meaning. Baptists are trying to redefine it, and at least some of us are objecting to that attempted redefinition. But it's not the case that the word has changed. This whole nomenclature, Reformed Baptist, you shouldn't assume that it's been in use for a long time. It's only been widely used since about 2000. I mean, it begins to spike. If you go to Google Ngram, you can see this for yourself. It's quite a bit of work to sort through all the returns, but if you do that, and I have done that, this is what you will see. If you look for the actual expression Reformed Baptist, you don't see it used hardly at all. Somebody sent me some years ago now a screenshot or a PDF or something of a Baptist newspaper from North Carolina, and I think it was 1823, and I footnoted that in an essay I published in a volume with at least two other Baptists Matthew Bingham and Crawford Gribben are Baptists in the volume on Being Reformed, where they're engaging more or less the thesis of recovering the Reformed confession. And then I responded to them. So if you haven't seen that article too, I'd encourage you to take a look at that. And anyway, in my essay in this collection, you will want to wait for that book to go on sale. You won't want to pay full price for that. It's basically $1 a page if you do that. And I don't encourage you to do that. And by the way, we don't get any residuals or anything from that. So I get it from a library. Get it through interlibrary loan. That would be free. If you go to your public library and you say, I'd like to get a book by interlibrary loan, they will be over the moon because that doesn't happen very often, I don't think. And you'd want to ask for, the title is On Being Reformed, Debates Over a Theological Identity. And then it has the names of all 5 contributors: Matthew C. Bingham, Chris Coey, R. Scott Clark, Crawford Gribben, and D.G. Hart. So that's a dialogue or conversation, maybe a better word, between us. It's published by Palgrave Macmillan. Don't remember exactly when it was published, but that should give you enough to find it. So if you do a study of Google Ngram and sort through the returns, you'll see that nobody's talking about Reformed Baptists in any meaningful way. Because we don't really know what was meant in 1823, so that's ambiguous. I wasn't able to tell. There's just not enough context. But what you do see is that late in the 20th century, and right at about 2000, with the same time as you see the Young, Restless, and Reformed movement beginning to spin up, you begin to see this language appearing more and more Reformed Baptist. So this is a very new way of speaking. And I keep reminding my Baptist friends and students and anybody who will listen that, the older way of speaking is particular Baptist as distinct from general Baptist, and this is about the atonement. So it's true that most, I think, particular Baptists of whatever sort, there are those who affirmed 1689 and those who didn't. And there are other Baptist confessions from that family that are slightly different. So they did affirm the Reformed soteriology, and they agreed with the Reformed on other things. But they all, Baptist, whether Anabaptist or particular Baptist or general Baptist, all of them, we lump them all together in this way, they all reject the Reformed reading of redemptive history. And my Baptist friends always tell me, well, that's not important. And my response to that is to say, well, that's what you think, but we don't agree. We've never agreed with your allegation, your suggestion that it isn't important. We think it's vital to our understanding of the scriptures, to the Christian faith. That's like us telling you that believers' baptism isn't very important, or believers' only baptism isn't very important. That's a secondary thing. And you'd say, well, wait a minute, that's our whole identity. We call ourselves Baptists, and by that we mean believers only baptism. And I'd say, okay, so these are really important things to you, and our view of redemptive history is very important to us. And that's what Reformed has always connoted and denoted. In other words, it's built in to the very definition of the adjective Reformed, and has always been since 1522, where we were engaging with the Anabaptists, by the way, on these very questions. This is the other thing. My particular Baptist friends say, you can't talk about the Anabaptists and us particular Baptists in the same breath. We're not Anabaptists. I've read the preface to the London Baptist Confession of 1644. I understand the objection. But from our point of view, you guys all agree on this one thing, right? That you deny the substantial unity of the covenant of grace. And some of you today, notable figures in this movement, say that and this has precedence in the particular Baptist tradition, that there's no presence of the covenant of grace in the types and shadows whatsoever. Right? And some will suggest, well, there's a way in which it is and ways in which it isn't, something like that. But most Baptists, most of the time, will say, well, when push comes to shove, the covenant of grace is only really present in the new covenant. It's not present anywhere else.
Ladies and gentlemen, Scott Clark.
So insofar as the Baptists and the Anabaptists agree on that point, they are all one thing, and then the Reformed refutation, response, reaction, rejection applies. And that's why I keep reminding people that when I read Zwingli in 1527, and he said things before that, but 1527, he wrote a whole treatise against the tricks of the Catabaptists. Cata means deniers of baptism. And the very arguments he made in that very pointedly written treatise are the very same points that we make today against our Baptist friends, because the Anabaptists and the Baptists agree on those things. They make the same arguments, and therefore the refutations are the same. The responses are the same. So no, particular Baptists are not Reformed. They've never been Reformed. And just because a lot of particular Baptists are using the word Reformed, stealing an identity really, in order to describe what they are, doesn't mean that what they're doing is true or accurate, and doesn't mean that it shouldn't get resistance or pushback. So it's true, as you say, that there are tri-covenantal Baptists, but again, that doesn't make you Reformed, because you still reject substantial portions of the Reformed confession, things that we regard as essential. You disagree, but that doesn't make you Reformed. And then, yes, as I say, you adhere to various confessions. So, I think I have dealt with these things at length. I just haven't podcasted them, but they are there. Anyway, I'm glad that this has been helpful. The podcast has been helpful, and I hope you keep going in your understanding of Reformed theology, and that you make it all the way over into the Reformed Church. And when you do, we will welcome you with open arms.
Thanks for listening. Tune in tomorrow for more from the Heidelcast, brought to you by HeidelbergReformationAssociation.org. Don't forget, when the coin in the coffer clinks, the cost of bandwidth shrinks. Copyright Heidelberg Reformation Association. All rights reserved. This is a Heidel Media production.
The best podcast, the Heidelcast.